Greetings and good morning, everyone. It's John Horgan here. I'm at the Legislative Assembly today on the traditional territory of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. And I want to thank the hundreds of you again for joining with Dr. Henry, Minister Dix, and I, as well as a guest. We have Dr. Robert Daum here with us today as well to give you an update on status of the vaccines, on status of health orders, and how all of us together can continue to deepen the dialogue that we've had and get through the next number of weeks until we can get back to, months, quite frankly, until we get back to some semblance of normal. I want to thank all of you from the bottom of my heart for the work that you've done within your families, your communities, and your congregations to spread the word that this is not forever, it's just for now. And although tremendous sacrifices have been made by people of faith, young people, old people, athletes, actors, singers, songwriters, the entire community has sacrificed extraordinarily over the past number of months, and we still have a bit to go. Dr. Henry will give you an update on the status of the vaccines, which will be arriving this week here in British Columbia. We're very excited about that. Adrian will give you a brief update on some of the issues that the Ministry of Health is working on, and Dr. Daum will talk. He's from the SFU Center for Dialogue. He'll introduce himself and talk about an engagement process that we want to encourage you to participate in that will, again, continue to seek advice from you on how government can best deal with the challenges ahead. This would be, again, another direct engagement, asking for your support and a collective response from all of us to how we get through this, regardless of what faith or denomination we represent. This is an opportunity for you to speak candidly to government through Dr. Daum and give us the counsel and advice we'll desperately need in the months ahead. So with that, I won't take up any more time on the limited time we have available, but just to once again reiterate that if you want to be on the list to speak, please press *1. Operators are standing by, and I'll just pass the microphone on to Dr. Henry for a few remarks as well.
Thank you very much, and good morning, everybody. I just want to express my gratitude. I'm speaking to you from the traditional territories of the Squamish, Musqueam, and Tsleil-Waututh peoples here in Vancouver, and Minister Dix is here, and he and I are appropriately distanced in a room here in Vancouver. I know last time we spoke was just before we had put in restrictions again on gatherings, and I appreciate deeply how challenging that is for people not to come together, even if we maintained our distances and wore masks, and recognizing how challenging and how difficult it is for many people. But also I have been so grateful and impressed by the ways people have supported each other with your leadership to get through this very difficult time. And it continues. We still have a high rate of transmission of this virus in communities around the province, particularly now outside of the Lower Mainland, even in the interior and the north. It's very, very challenging. On the horizon, however, we have the most positive news we've had in a long time, and vaccines have arrived in the province. They are in two areas now, in the Lower Mainland, in the Fraser Health Region and Vancouver Health Region, and tomorrow we will start immunizing people. And this will make a huge difference in our lives and the lives of particularly those most at risk in our long-term care homes. That's where we're starting with the immunization program. We hope and expect that more vaccine will be available, but right now the approved vaccines that we have in Canada, there's just one at the moment. We're hoping another one will be approved in the coming weeks. And in the first 3 months of the program, we're only guaranteed to have enough vaccine to provide protection to healthcare workers and residents of long-term care homes and frontline healthcare workers as well in the COVID response, to some of our community elders over the age of 80 and First Nations peoples who are at higher risk of having actually Indigenous peoples who are in settings that make them at higher risk of having more severe illness or needing health care. So that is our focus and our challenge for the coming months, and I'm hopeful to learn again how we can support and work together to keep people safe through this period. I'm so struck by the end is in sight, there is light, but we need to protect people and keep them safe until we can get to that point where this virus is no longer transmitting widely in our communities, and that means that we have to support each other for months to come, but there is an end in sight, and I just want to say again how much I appreciate all that you've done and how much I have learned from you over the past number of months, and I'll turn it over to Minister Dix as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Henry, and I just wanted to as well express my appreciation to everyone on the line, to faith communities everywhere in BC for their support. The last few weeks have been extraordinarily difficult, I think, particularly in long-term care. We had a day last week when 28 people passed away, and that weighs heavy on all of us, I think, all of us in the province. And I know many of you who provide support to people both in hospitals and long-term care as part of the central role of spiritual care. And I just want to emphasize with respect to immunization how important it is, not just to protect people in long-term care, but to return a sense of normalcy to long-term care, as you know, because it affects many of your much of your work with people, with elders who end up in long-term care or in assisted living or in hospital and require spiritual support and guidance. We've had pretty strict limits on visitation in long-term care. And so the focus of the first immunizations on long-term care workers, then long-term care residents, then essentially essential visitors and essential volunteers will help make those places safe. So while overall restrictions are likely to continue on for a while, and we are expecting about 8% of British Columbians on the present plan to be immunized by March 31st, what the actions that are taking in long-term care we hope will have very positive effects both on all of your work in support of your congregations and our work in long-term care. It's my honor to introduce, this is I think our 6th or 7th call, and personally I've been so appreciative of the support that we've received from this community, of leaders over the time of the pandemic. Our first call I believe was in March, and our last one was just before the most recent orders came down. But I think it's really important right now, with months and months and months to go of this, to deepen our connection with one another, for us to receive your counsel and your advice in a more organized way. And that's why the Premier and myself asked Dr. Robert Daum to lead a process where we would hear from you. The idea of the process is not for us to give you counsel. Dr. Henry gives health counsel to the province on a regular basis, but to hear from you and to receive your counsel, which is so needed by us at this time, and also by those in your communities, in your faith communities, and by the health system in general. So we asked Dr. Robert Daum and the Centre for Dialogue to engage in a bit of a process where we would hear more regularly, not just when the Premier sets up a call like these, which have been really valuable, but to deepen it. So I wanted to take this opportunity to welcome Dr. Daum and introduce him to all of you, and over to you, Robert.
Thank you, Minister Dix. Thank you, Dr. Henry, and thank you, Premier Horgan. As you've heard, my name is Robert Daum, and I'm a fellow at SFU's Morris J. Wask Centre for Dialogue. I'm honored to be working with a skilled team at the Centre for Dialogue to convene and facilitate a series of dialogues on behalf of the province. We plan to host via Zoom at least 5 90-minute facilitated dialogues in a combination of plenaries and facilitated breakout rooms for representatives of a dozen or so spiritual communities within BC. For the first session later this week, the government will invite 25 to 30 people for a dialogue on gathering safely during the winter. Because of the proximity and significance of gathering in groups for many Christians over Christmas, we anticipate having one breakout group for Christian participants to share their ideas, facilitated by a skilled Christian facilitator, on the Christmas context. Because everyone is gathering over the winter, the other 2 or 3 breakouts will be mixed, as will be the opening and closing plenary segments. My colleagues and I have deep respect for the painful sacrifices that all British Columbians, including members of spiritual and religious communities, are making during the COVID-19 pandemic. We seek to foster relation-based rather than transactional approaches to engagement. And because the value of these dialogues will be the result of the best efforts of all communities, we've started to reach out to representative leaders across the religious community spectrum to seek their support for this initiative, to invite their general advice throughout the process, and to request their recommendations of potential invitees, people who, in their eyes, should be at these tables. We will continue this outreach to diverse communities. The purpose of these dialogues is to seek advice for government around engagement and compliance with evolving public health orders and guidelines, to invite sharing of adaptations being made by different communities, and to invite guidance about how best to communicate with spiritual communities the good intentions and respect that government has for all British Columbians, including faith and spiritual communities. The aim is also to seek advice from communities whose wisdom traditions have been shaped for generations through wars, pandemics, and natural disasters, regarding how we all can work together to face the fears, to inspire hope, and to support public confidence in the necessity for evolving health orders and the importance of heeding public health orders and, when they become available, vaccination. This dialogue series will convene representatives of religious communities whose ancestors came to these shores from other parts of the world and settled on these lands as uninvited guests, and representatives of newcomer communities who sought opportunities or safe refuge in our province. All of these people and their communities are now part of the fabric of British Columbia. It is very important to say that participants in these dialogues also will include Indigenous elders, whose wisdom and leadership are integral to any community-wide discussions of public policy on their ancestral lands. It is important to clarify that including Indigenous community elders and participants from non-Indigenous religious communities in a shared dialogue series like this is not prompted by a simplistic and inappropriate notion of a multicultural umbrella. Indigenous peoples and their traditions are not in the same constitutional category as those of settler and newcomer communities. However, this pandemic threatens all of us, and we're all here now. Nothing about us without us guides this principled approach to a shared series of conversations. If you or your colleagues within your particular community do not receive an invitation later today to this week's first dialogue, please rest assured that while we cannot include all 400 participants in the series, or what is the point of having smaller dialogues and concentrated conversations, we will do our best to include in at least one dialogue as many as possible of the invitees.
Thank you, Robert and Bonnie and Adrian. Now we've got questions lining up again. If you want to participate in this dialogue today, star 1, please. And first up, we have Reverend Gwen Drager from the Independent Assemblies of God. Go ahead, Gwen.
Thank you for this opportunity. My concern for the healthcare workers that are on the front lines, one of our great opportunities, something that we lead through, is last rites. I think it's very important that we have access, and as we all know, there's been so many restrictions in hospitals and long-term care. We respect that, but I believe that there are some of us who are skilled, who know how to go in with PPE and administer last rites. I believe that will also lift some of the load that are on the frontline workers, where they've had to help the hands of those who are dying. And I believe this is something that's very important and vital to the faith people, that we are there for those who are dying. It's part of our call, and there's a grace to do that. So if we could make a way for that, I would highly appreciate that.
Thanks, Gwen. Bonnie, do you want to comment on Gwen's point?
I think just, first of all, it's just Adrian Dix here. I just think that this is why we're so focused initially on long-term care in hospitals. So the first people to be immunized will be long-term care workers, because we want to put something of a ring fence to stop the initiation of or the entry of the virus into long-term care, and then the residents in long-term care, and then people in the same class really as workers of long-term care, the people I would call essential volunteers. So this is exactly the approach we're taking. It won't happen immediately, but I take your suggestion as part of that. I think it's part of what we need to do. Right now, there are essential visitors in long-term care, and they sometimes do include people on this line and others. But we need to try and return that world to one of normalcy, because there's no world of all the disruptions, the most profound, the most dangerous, the most shocking to all of us has been the impact on long-term care. And we've done better in BC than just about anywhere else in North America, and it's still awful here. So I take that suggestion, and that's one of the primary goals of what our immunization plan seeks to do in the first month or two of the vaccines.
I will also say that I know your point was around acute care hospital visitation as well, also more challenging, particularly now with rates that are so high in the community, and the challenges we're seeing, particularly in the Lower Mainland, with it getting into hospitals. But as we are able to protect more people with immunization, as Minister Dix indicated, these types of essential visits will become safer.
Thank you.
Thanks, Bonnie. Thanks, Gwen. And next up, Reverend Mark Lapointe, Christ the Redeemer.
Good morning, Minister and Premier and Dr. Henry. Just a point of clarification before I go into what I want. Dr. Robert, what is the spelling of your last name?
D as in.
Sorry, Robert. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
that's okay. Yeah, I've been saying this for years. D as in David, A-U-M as in Michael.
Thank you. It's just the phone distorts things, as you're all aware. Thank you all for regularly reaching out to the faith communities as you have with these teleconference meetings. I think I've participated all the way since March. So yeah, I am the pastor of a little Lutheran church on the North Shore of Kamloops, St. Andrew's Lutheran Church. And I have 3 questions which need clarification, and they may actually be related to what Dr. Robert is going to be doing, but I'm hoping that Dr. Henry maybe can enlighten us. I have to admit that many of my colleagues and I are sort of bewildered with some of the provincial regulatory requirements. So I'm going to start with a little bit of a preamble, though. Last Friday, a bylaw officer came to our church saying that he had received a complaint from someone who had watched our internet videos and claimed that we were in violation of the provincial regulations. So we showed him our worship space and assured him that we were adhering to all the regulations. After examining the front of the church, which is about 30 feet wide, includes the pulpit, altar, music area, he said that the church was a public area and needed to be treated like a hotel lobby with physical partitions. He concluded by saying that if we didn't use partitions, we would have to wear our masks at all times. So on Sundays, there is nobody in the church except myself and the 5 musicians, the pianist, 2 guitarists, 2 vocalists. We've been closed to the public since November 22nd, as per the restrictions. We live stream our complete worship service to YouTube, which is viewed by the members of our church in their homes on Sunday morning. Geographically, I'm on the left side, about 24 feet away from the musicians. All the musicians are on the right side, positioned at 7 feet spacing from each other. We wear masks when we're moving from one location to another, but not when we have been stationary, either praying, reading, or preaching, or singing. So my first question is, we were told that we need to wear masks at all times, even when we're singing. Is this a requirement, or can we sing and can I preach in location without a mask on?
The short answer is yes, you can, recognizing that singing is a higher risk of transmitting droplets. So as long as you're maintaining you're singing away from each other, not facing into each other. That should help. But some people interpret things more literally than others, and I can certainly look into the interpretation that the bylaw officer gave you.
Thank you. Yes, like I say, it is bewildering, and you have agreed there, and we will definitely make sure that is happening. So my second question is actually very similar, because we are planning to videotape our Christmas Eve candlelight service on a different day of the week, and then download that video to YouTube. We have a videographer who we are hiring, and he plans to do close-up on people when they are singing and reading. Of course, the camera won't be that close to them. So as long as we're not singing towards each other, as you have said, we won't be requiring masks on. Is that correct?
That's correct. Your
Okay,
videographer should wear a mask, particularly if he's not somebody who's regularly part of your group.
Yes, no, yeah, that won't be a problem. He is a professional, and the third question actually relates to him because he's planning to also do some Christmas musical productions that are set in church buildings. Now, this bylaw officer said that a church building was classified as a public location, even when the closed to the public signs are posted. And so he's concerned about being able to do this work that he wants to do in church settings with musicians who may be playing brass and string instruments. And he wants to know if those particular people will be required to wear masks when they are taping.
These are very detailed things. If you want to send me an email with your details, we can work them out for you.
That'd be great. What email should I use? I only have the connection to the town hall meeting.
So why don't you send them through to me? That's Adrian, that's ADRIAN .Dix, DIX, at gov.bc.ca. And we'll also have other contact places to send to everybody after the call.
That is greatly appreciated. And I apologize for the detail of these questions, but it is the Christmas season, and we are all in gear to try and do as best as we can to bring the Christmas message to our people.
There are many different detailed questions that I get inundated with every day, and it's challenging, I know, because the bylaw officers are doing their best, but it can be some people's interpretation is different from others, and we need to understand the circumstances so we can work with Interior Health and make sure that you get the information you need.
I thank you very much, and I wish you all a very Merry Christmas.
Thank you. You
Thanks,
too.
Mark.
Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Mark. And Merry Christmas to you as well. And again, to Mark and everyone on the call, and anyone, all of those who will be participating with Robert, these are the very things that we want to talk about with you so that we can get the clarity that you need to continue to be leaders in your community. This is how we'll be successful going forward. And as Dr. Henry said, everyone views things differently, and whether they be officers, bylaw officers, or citizens who believe that they want to see a more rigid interpretation of health orders. So it's a challenge for all of us, and thank goodness we have the opportunity to have these dialogues to clear the air and clarify points. Next, we have Rabbi Kaplan from the Shabbat of Vancouver Island. And before you start, Rabbi, happy Hanukkah, and what a great celebration at the legislature on Thursday. That was wonderful.
Yes, thank you very much, Premier. Thank you, Dr. Dix, Minister Dix, and Dr. Henry. First of all, Premier, thank you for participating in our Hanukkah celebration, virtually, of course, and also Minister Dix and Dr. Henry for showing your support and coming to see us by the menorah before the event started. So, first of all, I just want to give a bit of background. We closed our synagogue already in March, and we were very careful. We made the mask mandatory before it was required, and we limited to 30 people in a space that can have about 160. Now we cannot conduct services on a Saturday on Zoom because we don't use any electrical devices on the Sabbath. Now, my concern that I started feeling from the community is people feel that the fact that religious services are suspended categorically with no exceptions, while businesses can operate 12-step meetings and other business meetings and theaters and so on and so forth. We go to food quarters, they see people are eating together. And we cannot even conduct a service even with a small amount of people, with all the social distancing in place, and we cannot conduct service in any other way. People feel that's inconsistent. And just getting a lot of pushback from people on this, especially because it seems like there's no other province or no other country really that from one end is allowing businesses to run, but on the other hand, with no exception, is suspending religious services from any kind of gathering. So I wanted to have a little bit of clarification about it. Again, we cannot conduct services over Zoom or over the Internet. We are willing to go as far as possible with reducing the risks that the gathering can present. But why is it that it's categorically suspended specifically for religious services? Thank you.
So I think I can start on that, and it is not limited to religious services. As you know, it is all events where people gather, and I think we can agree, I hope, that religious services are qualitatively different than going shopping and picking up groceries at a grocery store, or picking up your toilet paper at Costco, where you're moving in and out. You're not actually congregating with people. You're wearing masks, you're keeping your distances. Movie theaters are closed, all of those are closed. We do allow for people in the same household to eat at restaurants together, and we know that they have specific measures in place, but we also know that that's a place where many people rely on for having a meal. So it is trying to find that balance, and I think you'll find if we look across the country that the same types of restrictions are in place in other places and quite frankly around the world. I mean, we know that many people have had to make that sacrifice to try and protect their congregations. And in any place where we come together, this virus doesn't recognize that it's a religious service. It recognizes.
Yeah, that's correct. I appreciate that. So first of all, for people who do observe those religions, obviously that is considered for them at least as essential as going to a restaurant or a food quarter to eat. From their perspective, this is essential for their lifestyle. But from what I believe, in other provinces, it was limited to a certain capacity. So they say you can have only 10% of the church.
That's the only province that's doing that is Alberta. Everybody else has suspended in-person services, and I recognize that particularly for Jewish services that it is not being able to access Zoom, and we can certainly look at how we can facilitate services being done for your congregation, given that concerns, but we're trying to find a balance. It's not about penalizing anybody. It's about trying to find ways that we can keep each other safe when we know that it's a very challenging time right now.
Yes, thank you. What I'm saying about the balance is a balance also between the religious needs of people and how they feel it is an essential thing in their life, and also the health. So when you say suspended, it doesn't feel like so much of a balanced. It feels more like suspended. But if there's a way of balancing the religious needs of people with the health risks, and finding a way that those two things can be answered at the same time, I think that way we make sure that people personal concerns are also answered, and people feel that it's consistent. Because when people go to the mall and they see the food quarters filled with people, and they cannot sit in big distances in the synagogue wearing masks, open windows. We changed the ventilation system. We changed the filtration. We are washing the washroom between every people. We're doing every possible thing. So if those things cannot be done ever other religious settings, it may make people uncomfortable.
I do think, though, and the order with respect to gatherings is published really it lays out about 50 different kinds of events. The overwhelming number of those are secular. So the approach to gatherings and events is the same, whether they're religious events or not. I understand the enormous sacrifice this entails for everybody. And I was asked about this, we were asked about this at a recent briefing, and I noted that in the church that I go to that our minister had died of cancer this year, and he was a very important person to all of us, and we weren't able to really recognize or celebrate that in the church and to celebrate his life and what that meant to everybody. So we understand the sacrifice, and the purpose of the order is to address all events and gatherings and to do so in an even-handed way. In that sense, it's balanced, but the consequences and the sacrifices by all of you are enormous. And I just want you to know that we recognize that both personally, but we also recognize that from the people who talk to us all the time. So the balance we're trying to maintain is with a virus that is unrelenting in its desire to transmit, and that's why after keeping a limit of 50 for 7 months, essentially, the decision was taken by the provincial health officer to prohibit outside gatherings and events towards the end of November. But we understand the consequences of it, I think, and you're telling us about those, and others have as well, and we respect that.
And I hope that will be considered. I just want to add one note. We have a religious belief of the importance of saving lives, and we take it no less seriously than anyone else. We have been, like I said, above and beyond what the requirements of the government were. But at the same time, religious services are important to people. They are essential, like I said, no less than going to a restaurant or a bar. And I think there must be a way to balance between making sure there's no health risk or reducing the health risk to the minimum, at the same time allowing some kind of religious gathering, especially when we don't know for how long this order is going to continue. I appreciate your consideration.
Thank you, Rabbi, and I know Dr. Daum will take this into consideration, and it will be a key part of the dialogues that he's initiating. Next, we have Minister Sheila McKinnon from the First Metropolitan United Church.
Good morning. Thank you very much for all your hard work. My question seems quite simple compared to some of these more complex, multi-layered questions. We're doing everything by live stream, and grateful for the opportunity to be as safe as we are here on Vancouver Island. My question is this, Dr. Henry. Can you help us get poinsettias into the nursing homes? We're having trouble. We are not trying to visit in person. We know that that's really restricted, but we wanted, like some of those people have been locked in for so long, we wanted a little bit of joy, a little bit of cheer. What do you recommend we do?
I think that's a fabulous idea. As a matter of fact, the minister and I were talking about this, that, what can we do for our seniors, particularly in long-term care. And I know there's some good evidence that having a plant is something that actually brings joy to people, and something that relies on them. So let's look at how we can facilitate that. I'd be happy to try and support that.
And we're looking at that this Christmas because this is a very, very difficult time for the workers, but especially for the residents in long-term care. And I can tell you that's one of the things that we're working on right now, is how we make it better. And plants is one thing, and all the other things that makes Christmas special, food and other things, we're looking at ways to up our game if we can in what is just an extraordinarily difficult time in long-term care. So thank you very much for the question. We'll be following up.
Thank you. Merry Christmas.
Thanks, Sheila. And to you. Next, Rabbi Rosenblatt.
Hi, thank you very much. I was just wondering, I was recently in Montreal, and in Montreal they have a 25-person limit on their services. My colleagues in Toronto tell me that there is a 10-person limit on services. And I was thinking perhaps British Columbia would be able to copy those models, specifically since it seems like those have been safe and proven effective in mitigating transmission in those locations. So I would just submit that for consideration.
Yeah, we have a 10-person limit, as you know, for key ceremonies that need to happen in a period of time, and aligned with what other places around the country are doing as well. And I think you'll find that it varies in Ontario depending on what zone people are in. We've tried to be consistent with the same number over the period of time, and quite frankly, there's no evidence that supports any of it. What we were starting to see was transmission events happening. We've seen it in churches, in temples, in gurdwaras, in a variety of different places, and that's why we took the measures that we did. I don't believe these will need to be in place forever. They are temporary measures, given the transmission rates we are seeing in our communities right now.
Do you think that those transmission rates might be smaller if the numbers of individuals and the times was restricted? Let's just say it was 10 persons for 1 hour. Would that be
You know, that just means that the probability is you're going to spread it to fewer people. Right now, it's the transmission in the community that is leading to the risk. So any number of people means that you have the potential of spreading it to that number. So it really is, there's nothing right now about coming together in this type of a congregation that is safe, because we have so much of the virus in our community and people unwittingly bring it in and pass it to those that they're closest to. So that's the basis behind what we're doing right now. What we need to do is get our community transmission rates down, and that will make it safe to come together again. And we've flattened in most places of the province, except the interior and the north are still very challenged. Rates are going up. Vancouver Island has been relatively spared, but even then in some communities. And the challenge we have is not knowing. It's very challenging because people move around, we know that, and they can spread it without recognizing it, that they're at risk to others. So we're at the point where we were playing catch up in a big way in the Lower Mainland, because there had been so much undetected transmission. But the bottom line is, as soon as we can get our transmission rates down in the community, we can be safe to come together again.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all of your hard work and your care for our province.
Thank you, Rabbi. And if you want to get on the list, please press *1. And next we have Father Chad Polishin from the Okanagan Parochial District. That's what it says on my document, Father Chad. So off you go.
Oh, thank you. Thank you very much. So I, not to repeat everything that is has been said so far about, changing the numbers or considering the numbers of gatherings, but one of the big difficulties with the restrictions, the guidelines that have been put in is most of our parishioners, or my parishioners, between Kamloops, Kelowna, and Vernon, in the parishes I serve, are seniors. They still independently live, majority of them, and technology is difficult. I'm live streaming my services, but they can't get them because they don't have internet, or they don't manage their TVs beyond the channels. They are used to donating when they come to the church, so donations, of course, are down. And the federal government had the wage subsidy and the various things that they put out, but this is, without our normal fundraisers in the parishes, without rental incomes from halls that we have, the members not being able to come, especially during this time, but in general, we faced a very difficult situation financially
coming up of what's going to happen in our parishes. So I'm asking, that is the provincial government looking to support our faith communities in situations like this? Is there going to be some assistance of some sort?
And I can't answer that question, but I can say that you raised the issue that is the most challenging that we're facing, is that those people who most want and need to come together are the people who are most at risk of getting severe illness and ending up in hospital or succumbing to COVID-19, and that's our seniors. The single most important risk factor for severe illness and death is age. So finding ways for seniors to participate in these essential services of religious and faith and spiritual needs, in ways that can work for them, is the challenge that we are facing. And whether that's, I know there's been many things that I've heard about, that people are doing phone calls for seniors, doing drop-off food and other things, materials for seniors, having ways to connect with them in ways that they are able to relate to. I know I don't presume to know all of the ways of doing that, but I absolutely understand how challenging it is, and these are the people we most need to keep safe. In terms of supporting the churches, I'll turn that over to the Premier or Minister Dix.
Yeah, I think the other thing I just want to emphasize on healthcare is that the very region you're talking about, Central Okanagan, we provided some information by local health region last Thursday, is one of the highest levels of transmission right now. The absolute highest level of transmission right now is probably in Fort St. James. So there was a long period where we saw this as principally a Lower Mainland phenomenon, or more Lower Mainland phenomenon than elsewhere, but we see very significant and very concerning transmission in both the Interior Health Authority and the Northern Health Authority. On the question of supports, that's something I hear and we'll take a look at. I know that all of those issues are things that our COVID response, our non-healthcare COVID response are looking at, and that's something that I'll take back from this conversation.
Yeah, just one thing I wanted to mention with what Dr. Bonnie responded. It's we are making phone calls to people. We are doing the drop off and that, but it's that and what you guys don't see is ahead of your opening back in the spring, when you guys said guided that we could begin to have small gatherings in the churches and whatnot. I had to go through for each of my parishes a 8-page checklist for my bishops, in addition to what your guidelines were, to make sure that we had our people safe. And I think this is one of the things that would be very helpful for the future to consider, is not maybe making a blanket, even though we're seeing things, but reaching out and saying, okay, what are we doing, and how can we maybe do by case basis with some things. It's a lot more work, but our bylaw people are coming and visiting. It would take a matter of minutes to review some of these things with them, and we could be moving forward. Sorry.
I'm so appreciative of that. The one thing I would say is that I think the import of the most recent order by Dr. Henry is that really gatherings are not safe right now, and that's increasingly apparent to us, and was increasingly apparent in the reason for the order. But I don't think there's any question that the effort made by faith communities across the board has been exceptional and extraordinary, and the pressure that it's put on and the need is profound. And we've been hearing from this, not just on these calls, but regularly from people and engaging with people over time. So we're very appreciative of all of your efforts to keep your parishioners safe throughout your region. We so appreciate it, and we have a lot to learn from it as well.
Yeah, and I would just add, Father Chad, that there is a working group of cabinet that's focused exclusively on recovery, and we will, Adrian and I are both members of that committee, we'll take this information back to the committee, we'll have a discussion. Dr. Daum's process is designed explicitly so that you can feel more confident that you can speak candidly to the dialogue rather than to Adrian, myself, or Bonnie. Although we greatly appreciate this, we do recognize that there may be some inhibition on the call about how candid you can or should be. Of course, we want you to be as candid as possible. That's the only way we'll be able to affect the changes that you're suggesting. But from our perspective, as both Dr. Henry and Adrian have said, what we see is 600 British Columbians who are no longer with us. And we see thousands of cases of COVID-19, and it's not malice by any individual or group. It's a virus, and we're doing our best to be responsive to the needs of the community at the same time that we're doing what we're obliged to do, which is protect the public health of British Columbians. And it is a balance, and sometimes we don't get it right, and we do our best always, every day, to make improvements, and that's why we've had these discussions over the past number of months, and why we want to take it to the next level and deepen those discussions so that you can speak more candidly to Robert than you would maybe to Bonnie, Adrian, and I. And that's not that anyone's been holding back, but I think being candid, being in a dialogue with colleagues, going back and forth, you'll perhaps come to conclusions that will be more useful to us as we go into the new year, and the distribution of vaccines, which again I want to reinforce, as Dr. Henry will, that the arrival of vaccines is not the end of COVID-19, it's the beginning of a better day in the months ahead, and we need to continue to be vigilant, we need to continue to monitor and manage gatherings, face coverings, and all of the other public health initiatives that we brought forward. So with that, I'll move to Saroz Rashid from the Islamic Center. Saroz, are you there? Let's move to Minister Daniel Park from the Vancouver Korean Gospel Church.
Thank you all for your service, and it is difficult. I appreciate that. At the same time, we are trying to figure out the specificity of the rules, and sometimes it's been unclear whether I talk to Service BC or WorkSafe BC, and I haven't got an email response from Dr. Henry's office. So my question particularly is, how many people are allowed to be involved in the production of a worship service, as well as can we pre-record with volunteers, and how many at a time? And so it's been difficult to get that information. We run 5 services at the same time. How many people are allowed to be in the building? It's just been a constant mismatch of information according to each government official.
There's no specific restrictions on that, so that may have been what leads to the confusion. It's minimizing the number of people depending on your space. So there's no absolute number. So I can't tell you what that number is. But yes, you can pre-record things. That makes sense. Minimizing the number of people that you need to do that, and making sure they maintain safe distances and wear masks where appropriate, etc.
Okay, and is there a way to loosen the restriction? For example, if we have a greater distance apart, or even extra measures to allow in person somehow? I mean, it's just.
At this point right now, no, because what we've been saying, and the reason for this is that we have high rates of transmission in our community. So any coming together is a risk. If you're taking that risk to record the service so you can provide it to others, then you need to minimize the people that are involved in that. But we cannot be gathering right now until the rates in our community come down to a more manageable, safer level.
Sure. And just like to reiterate that our seniors are having difficulty accessing the technology. So it's a prior minister had mentioned that, and so I'd just like to forward that as well. Thank you.
And I know those are the things where we can learn from each other how to best support them. But again, seniors are people in our community and the people in my life who I desperately want to see who as well they are most at risk, and we need to take these measures to protect them.
Can I go back to see if Seroz Rashid is on the line? No? Okay. Next, we have Jay Olson from the Pacific Mountain region of the United Church of Canada. Go ahead, Jay.
Thank you so much for taking the call. And I want to start by saying thank you to you all when you do your public press conferences for acknowledging the diversity of faith communities and the many expressions and practices of faith within each of those, and recognizing that, we are all in this together and are doing everything we can to obey these orders. Because the people in my own bubble, for example, every single one of them is high risk. And so we recognize the life and death matter of these orders. My question is going to sound like asking for a prediction, and I'm really not. I'm asking if you can give us a little more about how you see farther down the road. So to help us to think about and see and possibly plan for the spring, believe it or not, that will soon be here, given the number of high holy days across our faith that are coming as early as March and the beginning of April. I'm not asking for predictions, but can you give us a glimpse, please, through your eyes about, and not in detail, about what you see come March and April, in light of the fact that we have the vaccine and we're doing what we can do to practice the orders. And thank you again for your service. I'm one of many in the communities of faith of the Pacific Mountain region who are enormously grateful to be living in British Columbia right now.
Thank you, and thanks so much for that. The optimist in me, others will know that I've been saying if we can make it till spring, if we can make it till Easter, I think we'll be in a good place for a couple of reasons. One, we know this virus doesn't transmit as well as we go into the warmer, for us, warmer months of the year. So there is a seasonality to the transmission, and that's what's made it such a challenge in these last few weeks, and where I think our challenge is going to last for the next few weeks. This virus transmits way more easily in the cooler months of winter. And that's one of the reasons why even those things that we were doing as late as September and early October are not working anymore. We're seeing transmission despite us taking all of those precautions that got us through the fall, last spring and the summer and into the fall. So that part of it we are learning about this virus and we can't control. But it is one of the things that we have seen around the world, that it is transmitting way more easily this time of year. But that also means that transmission will wane, and we see this with other respiratory viruses, and this coronavirus is following that same pattern. So by April, it will start to have reached that point where it's going away. As well with vaccine. And one of the reasons that the vaccine came early, we weren't expecting the Pfizer vaccine study to be finished until December, but because of the increasing rates of transmission, how these studies work is people get either the vaccine or a placebo. It's all blinded, which means The person who received the vaccine or placebo doesn't know what's in it, and the person who's giving it doesn't know whether they're giving vaccine or placebo. And then there has to be a certain number of people who have become infected with the virus to be able to determine if there's a difference between the vaccine and the placebo group. And though that it was expected with 40,000 people in the study, it would take several months to get that level of infection. In reality, it took much less than expected because there is so much transmission, and so it's irony, I guess, again. But that means that other vaccines are in that same position. So the Pfizer vaccine was, the study finished early. The Moderna vaccine, the data was collected and it's all in, and we're hoping it's going to be approved as early as potentially next week. And so we are getting a vaccine earlier. There's 4 others that are in the pipeline where that data is near to be completed. So with any luck, we'll get other vaccines that are more easily logistically delivered to people. They're fridge stable, for example, so we can deliver them in the community more rapidly. So if everything goes as planned, we should at the very least be able to immunize seniors and the high-risk groups that we've been talking about by March. If some of these other vaccines become available before March, then we can do much more immunization in the community, and that will make a big difference as well. So I really am optimistic that we will be living in a very changed, much safer place come March, April. I think next summer will be we'll be back to some semblance of normal. We'll be able to come together again, and that is so, so important. In the meantime, I'm hopeful that we can get the transmission rates in our community down enough that we can start having these important gatherings again. So I see all of those things coming together in the next few months.
Thanks, Bonnie. We're running low on time. We have about a half a dozen people still on the list. I'm going to go to Reverend Rob Thiessen from the BC Conference of the Mennonite Brethren, and for those others that are on the list, someone from my office will reach out to you this afternoon or shortly to get a sense of your questions, and we'll endeavor to get answers to you as best we can. So go ahead, Reverend Thiessen.
Hi, Premier Horgan and Dr. Henry. Thanks so much. And again, all of us listening, none of us would want your job, and we're so deeply appreciative of the work that you're doing. Listening to the questions, especially by the rabbi, I just wanted to resonate for our community. In our experience and in chatting also with other church leaders, we have been conscientious in following the rules and are not seeing the spread in our gatherings. And so appreciating your efforts, but also just wanted to again reaffirm the cost in terms of mental health and social well-being that we're seeing among our people. And even the National Post article here a few days ago by John Ivison, I think was the author of that, saying that Canadian mental health is falling off a cliff, and the impact of closing down faith gatherings impacts so many people in our province. And so our question again is, could we not try to help those communities where you have seen some infraction? If that happened at a particular gathering, that an enforcement officer would help that group follow the guidelines, because honestly, as we get together as faith leaders, we just don't, in our experience, none of us can say, oh yes, there's been an outbreak because of our church gatherings. So, it feels like that this general sort of blanket approach is maybe costing people in maybe unseen ways, increase in suicide, depression, loneliness, and so just raising that. And also, the look of police officers fining groups and the look of neighbors reporting on neighbors, it's just such a bad look for our community. And so we just really appreciate you thinking about that.
I do not think for a minute that I'm not consumed by the concerns about the consequences of the actions that we've taken. And we've spent quite a lot of time. I have a team that's working on the unintended consequences, both positive and negative, of the measures we've put in place. And the mental health issues are one of the key ones. Not only that, but it's the issues that we have around the overdose crises as well, and the implications that we've had on those. And there is no doubt at all that the measures, the issues that we've been all dealing with around loneliness and isolation, and there's also lots of examples of ways that we have positively connected, but it doesn't override the issue of the negative consequences, for sure. On one positive note, though, our suicide rates in the province have actually dropped quite dramatically, and part of that is that sense of community that we've been trying to foster from the very beginning, that we have a common goal here, and that is to reduce the impact of this virus on our communities together. And that is, having a common purpose and a common goal is one of the things that brings out that altruism, that support for each other. And that is much of the work that many of people on this call have been doing as well to support in your communities. It is a challenge when we see, and as I said, it's not about people doing the wrong thing and bad actors and not following guidance. It's the fact that this virus is spreading more quickly at this time of year that has made coming together more dangerous, despite the guidance we had in place. So the fact that you haven't seen outbreaks is merely, it's more luck than the guidance. The things that we had in place were starting to be seen. We could see that they were no longer enough when this virus is spreading and the levels of transmission we were having in our communities. And that is why we took the approach that we did. Once we get to the point where the virus again is not spreading at that level, then we can take those risks again, and we can have our small gatherings, recognizing that it'll only be a small number of people and the risk will go down again. So it is a matter of titrating risk to what we're faced with in our communities.
Thanks, Bonnie. And I would just perhaps ask Adrian for some final comments. Well, actually, why don't we start with Robert? Why don't you maybe some reflections on what you've heard and how you will endeavor to proceed with this foundation to your dialogues at the WAS Center over the next couple of weeks.
Well, thank you, Premier. Yes, it's so important to hear all of these, these ideas and questions. In the consultations that we've been doing late last week, one of the religious community leaders shared with me a really helpful citation of the author Henry Clouds, who spoke of the courage to meet the demands of reality. And this is a time when courage and collaborative thinking will be so helpful. And I just want to emphasize that, the government has not engaged me, to tell faith communities how to practice their faiths any more than the government presumes to be telling us how to do that. It's really a dialogue process that enables us to think together, that enables us to build on each other's ideas, to surface as honestly and fully as we possibly can the authentic questions that we have, and to work together to think our way through this historic challenge.
Thanks, Robert. Adrian, any final comments?
Just thanks so much to everyone on the call. To reiterate, I think what Dr. Henry just said, one of the things that I've admired about her approach is that we've had at times less rules than other jurisdictions, and we've focused them on what's necessary. And this was true from the beginning, and this has been, I think, a successful approach. And so the decision to not have outside gatherings was taken, you can imagine, very reluctantly and with an understanding that there are consequences to each of these decisions. And that's, we've seen this throughout this pandemic. We've seen a growth, for example, in the number of people who die from overdoses through the pandemic. We know that there are unintended consequences to every action taken, and spend a lot of time on those, and we'll appreciate your letting us know about some of those today, and that's certainly been true in my faith community as well. So we hear you. We not just recognize, but we empathize with a lot of what's been said today. So I just want to say thank you, and I look forward to hearing your voices as well in our ongoing dialogue, which I hope to be part of as much as possible, led by Robert.
Thanks, Adrian, and to everyone on the call, thank you once again for bringing forward your ideas, your suggestions, your observations. I believe that we have been successful in British Columbia because, as Adrian just said, Dr. Henry from Public Health and the governments through Adrian and I and our teams have genuinely tried to adapt to circumstances as they arise. And I think that we have been successful compared to other jurisdictions because of that. And we reached out to the people on this call early in the process. We've continued to do that. You may not have seen the reforms or the changes that you proposed entirely, but it is critical and to our thinking on these issues that we continue to get input from you. The appointment of Robert to assist in that a deeper dive as we look to the end of COVID-19 over the next number of months will better allow us to make the adaptations that we'll need that will help your congregants and will help government. That's our goal, that's our objective, and we can't do it without you. So again, thank you so much for continuing to speak and tell us your ideas, your concerns, and be assured that we take them very much to heart every single day. Dr. Henry, Adrian, and I are always trying to find the best way forward, and we'll continue to do our level best to meet that test. And when this is behind us, I very much look forward to the greatest celebration of all time. BC will be 150 years in Confederation in July. I can't think of a better reason to have the biggest party ever, not so much because of colonization and joining Confederation, but at least, as Bonnie says, come summer, hopefully we'll be able to dance a little bit of an Irish jig wherever and whenever we want to. So with that, the best of the season to all of you and to your congregations, and may we all be safe in the months ahead.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. This concludes today's call. Thank you for joining. Please disconnect.